She left him because he was poor, useless with no future. What she didn't know was that he was the covert strategic advisor to the Pentagon. He didn't argue, didn't beg. He simply stepped aside and waited for the right moment. When the truth came out, the entire investigation room stood up, calling his name. And she could only stand there, frozen. This isn't a story of revenge, it's a lesson. So listen closely. My name is Nathan Cole. I'm 41 years old. I work as a night security guard at an old industrial site on the southern edge of Washington, D.C., right off the I-495 Beltway near Suitland Parkway. It's a dead zone rows of abandoned warehouses, once owned by a transport company that went bankrupt long ago. During the day, the place sleeps, but at night, I patrol it in my dusty 2002 Ford Ranger. I check locks, scribble notes in the logbook, sip from my thermos of black coffee, then sit in a guard shack until sunrise. I bring books that no one reads, cold rice in a plastic container, and a silence no one interrupts. To anyone watching, I'm invisible, a man with no title, no money, no path forward, just a quiet shadow going through the motions. But that's how I prefer it, because the less people see, the safer they are from the truth. I live in a small rented house in Alexandria. Clean, plain, tucked into a neighborhood where no one asks questions. For a long time, I believed I'd die alone. And then, I met Carla. She worked part-time as an accountant. We crossed paths at a coffee shop one rainy afternoon. She was reading. I was just sitting there. We didn't speak, but her eyes held a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. We took our time. There were no fireworks, no rush, just a quiet rhythm that started to feel like home. Eventually, she moved in. For nearly 2 years, we lived side by side. Some nights, she'd turn to me in bed and whisper, "I've never felt as safe as I do next to you." I never asked her what she meant, and I never told her about Kandahar. I didn't speak of silent raids, or the night we buried a teammate in the sand, then walked onward like nothing had happened. I let her believe I was just a man who had failed, a man scraping by with a quiet job. I kept my past locked up, like I used to lock steel bunkers on the Afghan border. I didn't want her to see the blood I could still feel on my hands. But something changed. I don't know when it started. Maybe it was the late returns, the extra classes, the girls' nights that ran too long. I told myself to trust her, but her eyes, they stopped looking at me like they used to. We spoke less, ate less. I'd share something from my shift, she'd nod without listening. One night, I told her about a stray dog following me. Mangy, gray, limping. I said maybe it thought I was as homeless as it was. She smiled faintly and said, "Maybe it sees that no one remembers you." I didn't react. I just nodded. In my line of work, I learned to read silence. A glance can be an order. A pause can be a death sentence. A change in the wind can mean you don't make it home. So I watched and waited and said nothing. One night, I left work early, told my supervisor I wasn't feeling well. When I stepped through the door, I heard her voice in the kitchen. She was on the phone. I couldn't see her, but I listened to every word. I'm just tired. Living with someone who has nothing, I feel like I have no future. I stood in the hallway like a ghost. Didn't speak, didn't move. Her words didn't break me, they just unstitched something profound inside. I didn't confront her, and I didn't ask why. When someone starts to leave, they've already made their choice. And if you pull too hard, all you'll get is broken pieces. Still, I hoped. Maybe she was just exhausted. Perhaps she just needed time. But her eyes no longer paused on me. Her voice no longer carried warmth. She was leaving, and I already knew it. Then Thompson called, old friend, once a lieutenant in my unit, now an analyst at the Pentagon. His voice was firm and quiet. Nathan, I saw her, with a guy, young, drove a white Tesla X. I wouldn't have said anything, but I thought you should know. I listened, said thank you, hung up. No jealousy, no anger, just stillness, like everything inside had gone cold. That night, I stared at the Parker pen she gave me, the first birthday we spent together. Still had my name engraved on the side. I used it every night for shift reports. But now, I couldn't remember the last time she gave me anything, not even a reason to stay. I remembered her once asking, "Don't you think you should live with more of a plan?" I said. "We're living peacefully." She didn't answer, just looked at me, then turned away. Some goodbyes don't come with slammed doors. They arrive slowly, one quiet step at a time, until one day, there's no one left in the room. I don't know where I went wrong. Maybe I was too silent. Maybe I thought being kind was enough to make someone stay. But it wasn't. Carla wanted someone who could move forward, someone with ambition. I was still a gatekeeper at the edge of a world I no longer belonged to. And now, she was gone, and I still didn't know how to let go. I started noticing the signs more clearly. It was no longer just a vague feeling in my chest. Carla Jin was slowly becoming a stranger. First, it was her eyes, then her tone. She'd smirk when I shared something simple, a long shift at work, a stray cat I fed some bread, or I'd started rereading an old novel, the same one she once recommended. Back then, she'd sit beside me, rest her chin on my shoulder and listen without needing a reason. But now, she'd just say, "Oh, really?" and turn away. The unspoken words between us built up, like cigarette smoke in a room without open windows. You don't see it at first, but eventually, you can't breathe. Carla started going out more often. She said her company had new projects, claimed they were piloting a financial advisory program that required her to meet with clients one-on-one. I didn't question it. A man who's lived through what I have doesn't check phones or read messages behind someone's back. If someone wants to lie, let them lie, and if they want to speak, they will. But her silence, long, deliberate, daily, started to sound louder than any confession. One night, I noticed her phone had a new lock screen password. She'd never bothered before. I didn't say anything, but saw how she glanced at me after closing it. Not fear, just a flicker of guilt, quickly replaced by guarded calm. I wasn't angry, but something in that look told me she'd already started hiding pieces of herself, and I was no longer someone she chose to be honest with. I remember a night when the rain poured hard, washing the roads like a flood, trying to erase everything. I came home later than usual. Carla told me she'd been out with friends. I sat in the truck for a while, staring at the porch light, listening to the rain hit the windshield. When her car pulled up, I saw it her smile, that soft, glowing smile I hadn't seen in months. But the moment she spotted me, it vanished like someone flipping a light switch in a dark room. I stepped out and opened the door. She paused, then said, "I thought you were working tonight." I replied, "Too much rain." Switched shifts. She went quiet, then added, "My friend got stuck in traffic. I had dinner with an old acquaintance." I just nodded. Oh, no follow-up, no challenge, because deep down, I didn't need to know who it was. I just needed to confirm what I already felt. My presence, no longer made her feel like she was home. A few days later, I got a call from Marcus, an old friend who used to handle tech in my unit back in the Middle East. We hadn't spoken in years. His voice came through hesitant but steady. "Nathan, I know I probably shouldn't be the one to tell you this, but I figured better you hear it from me than a stranger." I leaned back in the chair. Go ahead." He hesitated for just a second. "Yesterday, I was at a tech expo in Arlington. In the hotel lobby, I saw Carla. She wasn't alone. Young guy, sharp dresser, startup type. One of those fast money, fast talking guys. I didn't think much of it until I saw how she looked at him." He paused again. "That wasn't a business look. Man, that was the look she used to give you when she thought you were the world." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Marcus finished his thought. "If it were me, I'd want to know." Then he hung up. I sat in the dark for a long time. Not angry, not broken, just erased. Like someone had wiped my name off a photograph without even asking if I wanted to keep the memory. I took a shower, let the cold water run until it numbs my skin. Looked at my reflection in the mirror. The same man staring back. A little older, a little duller. Gray in the beard, shadow under the eyes. I wasn't anyone people looked at twice, and I didn't need to be. But that look of being replaced, it carved deeper than any bullet ever had. Slow, silent, but it stayed. I went back to the room. Her phone was on the table. A message popped up. The contact name was D. The text was short, just 6 words: "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." Same cafe. I didn't open it, just placed the phone back where I found it, like it had never been touched. Then I lay on the bed. She wasn't home yet. I closed my eyes, trying to stop the loop, but 2 thoughts wouldn't leave. First, I'd survived wars, survived deserts. I've looked down gun barrels and walked through kill zones with people who'd slit my throat for breathing too loud. Second, the person now hurting me was the same one who used to whisper each morning, "I love you because you're unlike anyone I've ever met." And yet now, I was just anyone, another name on her list of people to forget. That evening, I came home earlier than usual. A steady drizzle was falling, the cold March rain on the East Coast. Not heavy, just enough to soak in. I parked out front. The car still smelled like stale coffee and wet fabric from my raincoat. I didn't move, just sat there a little longer, staring at the porch light flickering behind the glass. For some reason, I knew nothing would ever be the same. I stepped onto the porch, stone keys in hand, but I didn't unlock the door. Through the frosted glass, I could see Carla. She was standing close to someone, a man, young, sharp suit, the kind of polished confidence that usually comes with startup money and new shoes. Her hand was on his shoulder. Their shadows overlapped in the hallway light. He said something, and she laughed. Not politely, freely. A kind of laugh I hadn't heard in months. A sort of laugh that wasn't for me. I pushed the door open and she turned. Her eyes caught mine, brief panic. Gone in a blink. Then came composure. Too quick to be real. She took a breath, not rushed, like she'd rehearsed this moment. "Nathan," she said, calm, soft. "I'm sorry, I should have told you sooner." The man didn't flinch, didn't look away. He stood there, like he belonged in that house. Like I was the intruder. I looked at him once, then turned to her. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to know when it started, how far it went, and what it meant. I just said, "I understand." That was it. No yelling, no begging, no scene, just silence. I walked to the bedroom, grabbed my duffel bag, opened the closet, and began folding my clothes. No chaos, no shaking hands, just habit. Like a soldier leaving the last checkpoint, one final retreat, leaving nothing behind. She stood at the doorway and said, "Nathan, I don't want you to think I betrayed you because you're not good enough. You're a good man, but I can't keep living with someone who has no future." I paused, met her eyes, then nodded. "I don't blame you, and I meant it because blame wouldn't change anything, wouldn't give back the time, wouldn't make her love me again. All it would do is make me smaller." I stepped back into the cold. Rain still coming down, seeping through my collar. I didn't zip up, let the wind bite, let it keep me awake. I left the house keys on the table by the door. No note, no farewell. Just walked away. The streets were dark. The windshield wipers flowed with thoughts I wasn't ready to have. Yellow streetlights passed over the glass like slow-moving memories. Every moment we'd shared mornings making coffee, quiet nights watching old films. The time she whispered, "Don't walk ahead of me. I'll always wait for you," now felt like stories I had borrowed and from someone else's life. I didn't cry, not because I didn't want to, but because the ache wasn't sharp anymore. It was weightless, a hollow pressure behind my ribs, a kind of grief that didn't demand tear, only stillness. I pulled into a rest stop off Route 236, turned on the overhead light, took out the leather-bound notebook I used for work. I flipped to a blank page, wrote one line. Everything finally falls back into its place. I leaned the seat back, closed my eyes, and for the first time in months, I slept. Not with Carla, not with dreams, just silence. The kind that doesn't press down, just floats. I felt light, but I also knew something that wouldn't come back had been taken. No one is waiting for me to walk through a door. No place that felt like mine anymore. But I still had one thing. I had myself, and I knew it was time to return to the man I used to be, the one I'd buried beneath quiet smiles and soft routines. The man I was before I thought being ordinary might be enough. That dream was over, and I was done dreaming. After that night, I never went back to the house in Alexandria, not to collect anything, not to ask questions. A few days later, Carla sent a message short, restrained. "I hope you understand. I'm sorry, but I have to live my own life." I deleted it after one glance, not out of anger. The story had ended because I didn't need her words anymore. Quietly. The same way I had always lived. I drove to the Homeland Security Zone southwest of Diamuk, straight to the DoD compound. The gate guards didn't ask much, they'd seen me before. I looked the duty officer in the eye and said only one thing. "I want to come back. Full time." He studied me for a second, then nodded. No forms, no questions. Because when you've lived outside the system, but still carry the clearance, the door is always open. I wasn't the first to disappear from civilian life just to reappear in the war room. They assigned me to a single occupancy unit inside a secure residential block. It felt familiar. Iron frame bed, metal desk, a filing cabinet, and a monitor linked to the internal network. I started again, right where I left off 3 years ago. But this time, no attachments, no one to text, no reason to leave early. I reactivated my level 4 clearance, opened access to the strategic vault, and joined a dedicated unit assessing insider threats to national cyber defense. 12-hour days, endless model revisions, simulating how to neutralize bad actors not outside our borders. But deep within, that's where the absolute rot hides. I saw vulnerabilities no one wanted to admit, and I knew this was where I belonged. The role of night guard was over. That mask had served its purpose. I was finished playing invisible. But something else caught my attention, something I couldn't leave alone. Damien R. Lowell, the man Carla had chosen. His name came back confirmed through the federal ID grid. On the surface, a clean-cut entrepreneur. Ran a startup pushing space data systems for private use, but when I followed the funding trails, the mask slipped. One of his backers, a shadow subsidiary of a conglomerate involved in unauthorized defense equipment transfers. Gear that should have stayed classified. I didn't rush. I compiled the evidence, encrypted everything, and sent it to the Pentagon counterintelligence under clean chain routing. Then I called someone I trusted, Keller, the FBI liaison for interagency operations. We'd worked a takedown together back in Atlanta in 2017. I kept it simple. There's a link. Not enough for charges, but enough to trigger a sweep. Keller didn't ask how I knew. He just said, "Send what you have. We'll move." Because Damien wasn't just a stranger. He was a risk. A fracture line, hiding under the surface. And Carla, she had no idea how close she was to the edge. I could have walked away. Could have let her learn on her own. But I didn't. Because some people slip. Not because they're cruel, but they never saw the cliff beneath their feet. And if I ever loved Carla even once, then I owed her one last thing to pull her back before the ground gave way. I didn't tell anyone, not Marcus, not Carla, not even the team assigned to analyze the data. Everything I passed moved under my former code name, Shadow 12. I chose it that way, not for secrecy, not for recognition, but because I never needed my name attached to justice, just the truth. Because I've seen too many good faces worn by bad people. They smile as they climb into others' lives, then drag them down. I wasn't going to let it happen again. Not if I could stop it. This wasn't revenge. I didn't need revenge. I was closing a crack, one I recognized too well. Because when you've lived long enough around fractured walls, you stop ignoring the ones that look small. They always spread. And when they do, they take everything with them. This time, I acted before the collapse, quietly, without recognition, without rage. Just one final move. One last return to who I truly was. Things moved faster than I expected. 2 weeks after I sent the encrypted file to Keller, a joint task force was quietly launched, the Defense FBI and the Commerce Department's Tech Control Unit. No press, no headlines, no handcuffs. Just quiet surveillance and layers of data peeling back like old paint. Damien wasn't sloppy. He knew how to cover his trail. 4 shell companies. Funds were rerouted through the Caymans. An NGO disguised as a research partner, so no one hides everything. Not from someone who once designed the very systems that trace these shadows. By the end of the month, they called a closed-door meeting at the Pentagon cybersecurity sub-level B3 beneath the old admin wing. I was there, not as a witness, not as a victim, as the architect of the leak detection model. They used to catch him. No one said his name. No one mentioned Carla. But I knew. What we were dealing with wasn't just about protocol. It was about consequences. On a gray Monday morning, the raid hit his Georgetown office. It sat near the Potomac with clean glass and expensive lighting. The task force moved with precision. They executed a full system warrant, seized drives, swept the servers, and boxed hard copies. Damien didn't run, Didn't resist. He just walked out, silent, his eyes straight ahead, like the walls weren't closing in. I watched it from a secured surveillance feed. I didn't smile, didn't breathe deeply, just exhaled, like a door had closed behind me. What I didn't expect was Carla being pulled in the same day. No charges, not yet. But she'd shared an account with Damien just enough to put her on the edge. An apartment under her name had housed unregistered microchips. Keller told me directly she's not charged. But if more shows up, she won't walk free. I paused. Then, I asked one question. Does she know who designed the entire operation? He said no. Not yet. But I can name you during the hearing, if that's what you want. I nodded. Let me be there. Let her see it for herself. 3 days later, I walked into a cold room at FBI headquarters in room 7, bright fluorescent lights, the kind of light that doesn't allow you to hide. Carla was already there. No makeup, no armor, just raw, nervous eyes that kept searching the floor. When I stepped in, she froze, not in fear, in disbelief. The task force lead introduced me. Mr. Cole was the strategic analyst behind the insider leak model. Then he turned. Mr. Cole, anything you'd like to say? I stepped forward, just enough. Looked her in the eyes, not with anger, not with pride, just calm, like still water before a drop lands. I warned you, not to judge by appearances. That was all. She didn't reply. Her lips trembled, her eyes filled not from fear but from understanding, because in that moment she saw it all and she knew. I wasn't here for revenge. I wasn't here to win. I was here to finish something, quietly, cleanly. I left without another word, and I didn't look back, didn't wait for an apology, because sometimes, the more you explain, the more the truth dissolves. But the truth, when left alone, stands like a mirror, and that's enough. I walked out not as a man proving anything, not as someone striking back, but as someone who had already let go. The strongest person isn't the one who shouts. It's the one who walks forward, silent, resolute, leaving the past to settle on its own, like rain just after it stops. Still glistening on the pavement, quiet and clean. I didn't prosecute Carla, even though I could have. Her name appeared in the investigation reports. The transactions were there. The legal grounds are solid. But I let it go. Not because she earned forgiveness, but because I understood. Some people don't fall because they're malicious. They fall because they're weak. And when someone has already hit the edge of what they can take, adding punishment doesn't deliver justice. It only deepens the damage. I met Keller in private, just a short meeting among senior intel leads. I said one thing. I recommend no prosecution for Carla. He looked at me, surprised, but didn't press. Maybe because he knew I never act on emotion. I explained plainly. She didn't build the system. She wasn't the architect. She didn't even fully understand what she was near. She got swept up. Keller nodded. It's your call to advise. We'll weigh it. And they did. A week later, Carla was released. No record, just a written warning and a 5-year federal restriction from involvement in any tech-linked investment activity. Light, but clear, a reminder of how close she'd stood to the edge. I didn't reach out, didn't meet, didn't text. I watched from a distance, quiet, detached, like someone observing a story that had long since ended. A month passed. Then came the letter. It was handwritten, the same script she used to leave on fridge notes back when the world still felt steady. In it, she wrote, Nathan, if I could return to the first day we met, I wouldn't change a thing. But if I could return to the day I started seeing you wrong, I would choose silence. I wouldn't wound you with careless words. I'm sorry. I saw you wrong. I read it. Once. Folded it neatly. Placed it in the back of a drawer. Not to remember her. Not to hold on, but to remind myself that some apologies don't require responses. Forgiveness isn't a reunion. It isn't writing back. It's choosing not to revisit, not even in your thoughts. It's seeing the one who once hurt you and feeling nothing, no echo, no weight, just stillness. The kind that comes when a wound has healed, cleanly. I never returned to the old house in Alexandria. The keys stayed with the real estate agency. The lease was canceled. The things I left behind, I never asked for them. Maybe Carla kept them. Perhaps she moved on. I didn't ask because I'd already left that place. Not by distance, by mind. I stayed in the military zone for another 4 months. Finalized the last models for the interagency cyber defense framework. Then I left the task force. No farewell, no press release, just one line in an email. Mission complete. Thank you for your trust. That was all. I packed my bag and drove west to Shenandoah Valley, out where the fog moves slow and the trees hold their breath. I rented a cabin, one road in, no signal out. An old coffee pot was on the counter. An empty bookshelf was waiting. I filled it with books I'd never had time to read. Hemingway, Steinbeck, war logs, memos from a century ago that smelled like ink and iron. People say those are dry, but to me, they were history I once touched. I didn't wait to be found, didn't hope to see anyone. I just lived, not chasing peace, just letting it settle where it chose to land. And one quiet afternoon, standing in the trees, I heard the wind moving through the branches, not loud, not soft, just steady. And I realized, maybe for the first time in years, I was free, not because I'd made someone pay, but because I'd chosen to carry nothing more, no stories, no revenge, no past, just me, still standing, and that was enough. A kind of freedom that doesn't shout, doesn't ask, doesn't explain. It just lives quietly, like a breath you didn't know you were holding, finally released. A year after I left Dalmordes Sea, I received an offer from Central Strategic Command. They wanted me to step into a new Director of Strategic Security role for a public-facing military organization under the National Defense Bloc. No code names. No hidden orders, no more silence behind classified walls. A position with my real name. After nearly 20 years, I could stand in the light with nothing left to hide. I thought about it for 3 days. Then I said yes. The job took me all over, from Fort Bragg in North Carolina to Peterson Base in Colorado. But I spent most of my time at West Point. The place where young officers are shaped. The ones who will one day hold the weight of lives in their decisions. I didn't teach doctrine. I told stories. I spoke of what you feel when the silence before a mission sets in. Of what it means to give an order that might not bring someone home. I talked about fear. The kind you don't admit in uniform, but feel in your bones. One senior cadet, David, asked me during a session, "Sir, you lived so quietly for years, what do you do? Not because you had to, but because you chose to." Right, I nodded. That's right. Because sometimes, it's only in simplicity that you hear your own heart. He wrote it down. But I could see something in him shifted. After class, they came with questions, not about tactics, but about how to stay human in a world that slowly teaches you not to be. I never taught them how to be heroes. I just showed them how not to become hollow. And maybe that's all I ever wanted to leave behind. Not awards, not rank, just something to carry with them when orders turn cold and the nights feel longer than they should. I don't think about Carla anymore. She's a page that's long been turned. I don't know where she went. I don't wonder. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't something you revisit. It's just the absence of weight, the quiet realization that a thought no longer stings. Sometimes I return to the small cabin in Shenandoah Valley. The pine still stands by the porch. The old lamp still flickers near the desk. The same coffee mug waits on the shelf, which I picked up from a rest stop on a cold November morning. People ask why I never upgraded, why I live so simply. I just smile. I've lived among expensive things, and I've learned the only luxury that truly matter is peace. Now, each morning, I wake without needing to prove anything. I don't explain who I am or why I live this way. I've carried secrets. I've stood in silence when it cost me everything. I've rebuilt my name without asking for anyone's permission. I know who I am, and I don't need to be reminded. If there's one thing I've learned after everything, it's this: strength doesn't come from power or praise. It comes from standing in front of someone who once broke you and realizing you no longer need them to stand. From walking past the hardest chapters of your life and not tearing out the page. From knowing that even when you're alone, you are still whole. And if tomorrow I'm gone, I won't have regrets. Because I've lived long enough to understand what matters most isn't the fight. It's how you keep your heart intact when the world tries to turn it cold. And I've kept mine, not loudly, not proudly, but fully, quiet, strong, unshaken. That is the final victory. No spotlight, no applause, but the kind that lasts, in the stillness, in the quiet breath you take, knowing you never lost yourself. My story ends here. A quiet journey, through betrayal, through loss, through rediscovery. And if you're listening, and life has made you feel like no one sees you, then maybe this story met you where you are. If it did, share it with someone who needs peace. Leave a comment, I'll read everyone. And if you'd like to keep hearing stories that carry something real, subscribe. I'll be here. We'll meet again soon.